Welcome back to Conor Murray and Rob Kearney. They were with us on Thursday. And a special welcome to Peter O'Mahony, who joins us for the first time. No introduction needed. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
I was chatting to Peter briefly before we came on air, and he said, look, I'm going to do a few little games, the Six Nations, and if I don't like it, I'm never going to do it again. So if we don't see him again after today, it's Conor's fault and Rob's fault. And you should take it personally.
He'll let us know about it, don't worry.
We could start in so many places. Would you pick, because we haven't heard you talk in a while, just broad view, where's this team at?
Look, they've had a difficult week, I'd imagine. You know, having a good knowledge of the group, I'd imagine they'd have a couple of very honest conversations early in the week of what happened, you know, and more importantly, how they're going to sort it out. And, you know, it was great to see the lads coming off the bus there smiling. You know, the thing you want to do after a performance that you're not happy with is put the jersey back on. And, you know, the 23 who were lucky enough to take the jersey this week, I'm sure will be licking their lips to put in a huge performance.
When Farrell said a lack of intent, something I never thought I'd say about an Irish team, what do you think prompted him to say that? What do you think he saw in particular?
Look, it's a difficult one. You know, intent is intent. And as he said, it's something that, you know, certainly an Irish dressing room doesn't need to talk a huge amount. Not anymore. Back in the day, it was, you know, it was the emotional side of things. It was that was the aspect that you had to bring during the week. You had to bring it on match day. It's not spoken about a huge amount anymore. It's the technical, the tactical side that you marry in with your intent. But that part never changes. Didn't matter whether it's 2008 or 26. The intent part of rugby is the most important thing. And you put all the plans in the world in place. If that's not delivered with intent and physicality, as much as the game has changed, that hasn't. And, you know, that's what he didn't see last week.
I suspect we may see it today.
I think so. Like, you saw with the three boys coming on last week, you know, that's intent. You know what I mean? And that was the difference. And, you know, the hunger, and Pete's right, it rarely needs to be spoken about in an Irish dressing room nowadays. So, you know, I'm sure the three boys that came on, those clips would have been shown during the week, and, you know, as an example of what Andy expects from the team. So I think I'm looking forward to seeing a reaction immediately when they run out today.
I do think there's still a bit of an emotional piece to it. Like, I fully agree with Pete, and I was a part of those teams back in 2006, 7, 8, 9, where you get so fired up before a game and it's all emotion. And then Joe Schmidt came in and sort of made us a very unemotive but super process-driven team. Now, in saying that, I think, you know, there's some days, like when you go away to Paris, you do need that emotional. You need the guys coming out of the blocks, unbelievably fired up, ready to go and take it to the opposition from a physicality and collision perspective. Because they're sort of the two things that, well, certainly I always felt that needed emotion really high.
Yeah.
And I think the emotion element was a little bit off last week.
OK. We'll go through the team in more detail closer to kick-off. But suffice to say, a lot of new faces in today. And it was really interesting in the press conference, Pete. Farrell was asked, is this just like a degree, you know, there's rotation here, there's less of a gap week, or is it because players didn't play well in Paris and they're just out of the team? Now, for Farrell, that's a really easy one if he wants to just say, oh, look, bit of rotation, you know, everyone did their best. But he said, no, it's both. It was a real, like, crossed his arms, he said it's both. And it strikes me, you look at this Ireland team now, I'm not sure we've ever had as many jerseys, like, live up for grabs. He's generally been a very loyal coach, goes back to his tried and tested. You could say almost most of the... You could say, look, full-back, maybe in part because of injury to Keenan. You could say 12. You could say wings. 10 continues. You know, back row, second row. It feels like this is a really interesting time for this team, like a lot's in flux almost. Do you agree with that? Is that how you see it?
I agree with it in some ways. I tell you something for nothing, that when you get picked for an Andy Farrell team, you're picked for a reason. You're picked... You know, you say he's loyal. He was loyal to guys who were performing. You know what I mean? And as soon as you weren't performing, you know, and I've been there, you know what I mean? Doesn't matter how senior you are, you know what I mean? You were put on the bench, you know what I mean? You're put out of the squad. And that is an aspect of today's selection, 100%. You know, certainly, you know, there's some guys need to back off numbers-wise. There's guys who came off the bench, as Murr said. You know, you talk about intent piece. You look at James Ryan, you look at Jack Conan, you look at Nick Timoney. They came on and they were really intentful with their rugby play. So, you know, as much as I agree with it, you know, it's performance, and it is performance above all for Andy. You know, you never get anything in the way of performance. That is number one.
I think when you have the jersey, it's yours to hold on to. You know, and it's not lip service to say that. If one of these new guys who've come into the team tonight, if they shoot the lights out, there's a very strong chance that they start next week.
Yeah, maybe even more so than a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but the team is definitely not as settled as it was a few years ago too. You know, and sort of back to your point about it does feel as if there's a lot more positions up for grabs this time around.
Yeah. That has to be the way it is. Sorry, that has to be the way it is. If you're talking about Irish rugby, you know what I mean? You don't have the pool base that in England and France has. It has to be the case that you have to be performing to be in the team, you know what I mean? And these guys have got an opportunity. I'm sure there's a few of them have been banging Andy's door down over the last season, 2, 3, looking for a shot. Now here you go, and you've got to go and grab it.
It's quite striking, like Shane Horgan last week described the team as feeling stale, be it age, a lot of miles on the clock. It does feel, and again we can look at it in more detail in a moment, but for the purposes of our conversation, it feels like he's gone for energy and dynamism and people who are like fresh and eager to get going.
Yeah, and you saw it with the lads rewarded with starts this week, having come on and given energy and given that intent. And I think this week is always, you know, the Italy at home week. You know, we're used to like a few changes, and it's a nervous week if you're a starter usually, and you know someone gets a nod against Italy. Like it's a nervous time for you as a starter, because like the lad said, if boys come in today and take their opportunity and shoot the lights out, you know, then there's serious discussions to be had. So there's more changes now than we usually see. For, as Pete said, it's a bit of both. It's a bit of not performing and, you know, boys that are performing well with their clubs or whatever, getting a proper shot today.
Rob, more general terms, you felt in defence very standoffish in Paris. I've heard people say, God, is there confusion in defence? What, do they want to squeeze up? Do they not? In attack, there's kind of been question marks. We've become a kicking team now. Does that really suit us? Does it feel a bit muddled in terms of like playing identity? Are they still searching for something, or what are you seeing there?
I think they're still trying to figure it out and look for something. You know, defensively and attack-wise, I think we wear off in Paris. You know, I said a lot during the game, we need to bring more line speed as a team, and it's easy and it's right to say that, but everything starts with the tackle and the ruck.
Okay.
The ruck is the heartbeat of the game. So if you get in attack, if you get a good go forward carry, 3-second ruck ball where it's gone, then you're playing on top of the opposition and you're sending them back and they're not able to get as much line speed. And it's the same in defence, that if you're soaking tackles and you're giving the opposition really quick ball, well then you're having to backtrack and you can't get off the line. So, you know, it's a lot of it is down to that tackle carry, the ruck, the collision, how quick you can get the ball in attack and how much you can slow down the opposition ball in defence.
The big thing is the anticipation. You know what I mean? You can't, as soon as you've thought about a ruck, it's too late. Right. You know what I mean? And that's the part maybe that we...
Just missing the beat.
Yeah, we had to think rather than just doing. You know what I mean? I'm there already, and I think that's what I...
Why does that tend to happen, Pete, in your experience?
Look, sometimes you're not ahead of the game. We've always spoken about being ahead of the game. That's how you get on top, and that's how, you know, you're talking about the ruck being the paramount thing. That's how you get momentum. That's how your carries become easier. That how you're running onto the ball then all of a sudden. Whereas the last day we were fighting for the rucks that we won a little bit. Then all of a sudden now they're all set. Now it's harder to get go forward ball. You know what I mean? Whereas it starts with the ruck. It starts with your anticipation, getting really quick ball, and then all the rest of your plans flow much easier, including your kicking game. You know what I mean? It's much easier to kick the ball off a really quick ruck than it is to kick off, and you wouldn't talk
kicking
about this a lot easier than I can. Kicking on your own terms.
Like we were forced to, as a 9 watching, like it was, you could feel Jamison's frustration because the breakdown was affected and it was slow. So you heard on comms people asking for a different, you know, why are we going to the air so much? But we were forced to go to the air. You know, kicking on your own terms is a huge thing that Andy wants to see, and that starts with the ruck.